Well, it's almost finally May, and spring has finally sprung after a long-awaited 4.5 months, roughly. And here in the Chicagoland area, we typically, our last frost and the days that we actually put out our plants that we've started indoors is right around Mother's Day. So that was kind of a weird transition into what we're working on today, but we have some great Mother's Day projects that will actually work for other occasions as well. For example, in front of me here, we've got the Floral heart paper sculpture, and I have just some very simple flowers here, and I'm going to show you how to group these together here in a second. But here is, it's a paper sculpture, for those of you wondering. And what you're going to need to do is find a nice background color. And for those of you that are already familiar with our paper sculptures, this is going to feel very familiar. And again, this is the background. Then we have 2 layers that we're going to glue together to create the next layer of the background. And we're going to glue this right on top. We've got a nice, I believe this is a DCWV pattern that we're going to glue on top of that, and we're going to finish it off with these flowers. And then in a separate video, I'm going to show you how to apply vinyl, even though a lot of you probably already know how, and may even do something where I show you how to create your own caption if you want to do that. So without further ado, let's take a look at this project. Again, we don't necessarily need to do anything with this right now. I think once we get this assembled, we can put that on there. Our first step is going to be to glue these 2 pieces together. Okay, now if you are comfortable using like a spray adhesive, you can go ahead and do that. I believe it's Scotch or Elmer's that actually makes a repositionable version of a spray adhesive, which I highly recommend, because sometimes if you use that spray glue and you don't get it lined up perfectly, it's not very forgiving, and it will pretty much grip it and it won't let go, and you'll just have to deal with where it's positioned it. So if you're going to use a spray glue, get the repositionable stuff. Otherwise, just grab your glue and try to, I was going to say flood. You don't necessarily want to flood this with too much glue because then it may warp, but work quickly and get your glue out to the little extremities here and get that next layer placed right on top as accurately as possible. And because I'm using the Scotch glue here, this gives me a little bit of time to ensure that I get everything nice and lined up. And even then, if you don't get it perfectly aligned, don't worry about it too much. And one thing that I picked up, which is going to come in super handy for this, is this Cricut little brayer, which I can use to more evenly press this down so it gets a nice tight grip. And I also use this to apply my paper onto my mat. Okay, so there we go. We've got that glued together. That's perfect. And also, before we glue this down, okay, what we want to do is we want to give this piece dimension wherever possible. Okay, so take a look at the little leaves here and find the ones that are kind of loose. Okay, anywhere where they're obviously this leaf right here, you're not going to be able to do anything with that. But these leaves here that are loose, we can fold them and train them and pinch them to kind of bring them to life a little bit more, so that not only are we adding the flowers to add dimension to this piece, but we're also going to take this base layer here and do a few things with that just to kind of give it a little bit more dimension. Okay, and I'm going to suggest that we kind of do this now so that when we go to apply our glue to the back of this, we know where not to put glue. Okay, so I'm going to take these leaves here and I'm going to give them a pinch. Now this is probably a good 80-pound cardstock, but I don't know that it's as malleable as cardstock, like the AC cardstock we use. So I'm going to be a little more delicate with this when I go to pinch it, because I don't want to overly crease it and make it look unsightly. Okay, so just go around, find any of the loose petals, give them a nice pinch, cup them. You can use a pen if you want, or a really thin dowel. If you're comfortable doing it with your fingers, you can do that. So in this case, I'm going to take my dowel and just press the petal around the dowel like so. Okay, and that's going to ensure that I have a more even sort of pinch or curve to the petal. And again, it's just giving it a little bit more life. And now this one here, you kind of want to, this one I'm going to pinch because I want the pinch to begin here at the tip of the little leaf, and I don't want it to look weird. So this one I'm just going to do very subtly. Okay, and it's optional, but I can already tell that the light is kind of hitting it differently in the areas that I did pinch it. Okay, there's a little petal here that I'm just going to curl back. I'm going to curl that one back. I think that's too small to pinch. This little tip here, I'm going to peel that in. We've got this little flower here. I'm sorry, not flower, but this little leaf. I'm going to bring that in and just wrap that around my dowel. This one's kind of thick, so I'm going to wrap it around a thicker dowel. And then I'm going to give it a good pinch at the end, like so. Okay, and let's see. There's a couple little areas here that I could probably just curl back, like so. This one here can use a pinch. Give it a good little pinch there. And I'm going to curl this one back, like so. And there's one right here. Instead of pinching it, I'm just going to train it up. And I think that's probably all we can do, which is fine. Because again, we're going to be adding a ton of flowers to this to make it even more dimensional. But you can already see the little areas that we've lifted up here and what kind of impact that's going to make on our end result. Okay, so let's flip this over. And you can clearly see where we've pinched, so we know where not to apply glue. And well, let's apply our glue and let's get this thing glued down. So again, there's a lot of detail here. You kind of want to just find a rhythm and start applying your glue. Don't worry about getting every single little nook and cranny. Try to get your glue in as many places as possible, just so that it stays nice and put, but don't obsess, because if you do, you're going to run out of time and you're going to get nothing glued down because it's all going to dry. So do your best, and if you need to, what you can do is maybe just glue down half of it and peel back the other half and reapply the glue on the other half, because this is a lot of detail to try to cover in one fell swoop. So I'm also adding a little bit out to the corners so that that stays nicely for me. And you just have to be very careful here and use just use the cutouts there as guides to get that placed accurately and precisely. And I pretty much nailed it. That came out perfect. All right, so I'm going to take my little brayer here and run it along these parts here where it's flat. I'm going to try not to disturb the little areas that we that we creased or cupped. Okay, now I can tell that this little area here, I think this was the first area that I added glue. It dried up before I had a chance to really get it glued down, so I'm just going to reapply and just push down, get that to hold. Okay, and if there are any other areas that maybe didn't get a good grip, find yourself a nice little scrap piece of paper. Could be cardstock, preferably cardstock. I'm just going to use some copy paper here because it is even thinner. And just apply a little bit of glue right on there. Spread it nice and thin. And then you can just take this and just kind of paint it onto the little areas that maybe didn't adhere as nicely as you would have liked. Okay. And I can tell that this little area here didn't get enough love, so I'm just gonna throw a little extra glue right on my little, I'll call this my brush, and voila. Just get that to stick nicely. And just take a look around, see if there are any other areas that might need a little love. I think that looks pretty good. Let's have a look. That looks nice. That looks really nice. And then at the end, once we get all the flowers on, we're going to embellish this with some rhinestones just to kind of pretty it up a little bit more, and it'll be good. Okay, that glue kind of shot out on that one. It's okay. It's nice how this is nice and open here in the center. You can really clean things up if necessary. Okay, so believe it or not, this is probably the hardest part. The flowers are a breeze, and especially for those of you that took some time and made our last release, the Alluring Florals bundle, which I loved working on. And so many of you took the time to work on that centerpiece too, which was not an easy, well, it was actually an easy task. It was just somewhat time consuming. Okay, so next thing we're gonna do, we can do this now. It's totally up to you when you do this. I think I'm just gonna do this now. And this is the main 12 by 12 sheet that you need. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take some Zots or some foam squares, and we're gonna foam square this up. Now I see another little area here where it's not staying as well as I would have liked. And again, that's just a matter of grabbing your little brush, quote unquote, throwing a little bit of glue right at the tip of that. Okay, and just popping it right under there. If you have a little X-Acto knife, you can lift it up from one side to help get your little brush under there. And now I'm just going to release that and push this down so that it grabs a little more of that glue, and then you just push down and that'll hold it in place nicely. So this specific design lends itself to allowing you the opportunity to go back in and fix things if necessary. Okay, so yeah, and you know what? We may as well just put this down now. So I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to get my foam squares out. Now in this case, I have foam circles, which is fine. If you have squares, that'll work. Circles will work, whatever you want to do. And the idea is to get this thing nice and elevated so that we have a nice little, so we have nice dimension and a nice little shadow that will be cast on the layer behind it. Okay, so I'm going to start at the corners, of course, to make sure that the corners are nice and anchored, and then I will go in the center between those two corners. Try to eyeball it as perfectly as you can. And then we'll decide through a very sophisticated test on how many more we should add to really make this thing structurally sound. Okay. And by very sophisticated, I mean very sophisticated. I'm just kidding. It's actually a very simple test. All right, so let's do this sophisticated test real quick. So once you have a few of these down, now I didn't take the backings off of this yet so that I can do this. Flip this over and just kind of take a look at how it's sitting. Okay, and then just kind of give it a push in some areas. Okay, and I can see that it's kind of like here. If I push it, it really gives way. If I push here, it doesn't move. If I push here, it kind of gives. So what I think would be a good idea is to add a couple more little support pieces in between the ones that we already have. And that's going to sturdy this even more, which will prevent it from warping and kind of extend its life even more. Well, not extend its life. I mean, it'll, either way, it will last. It's just that I think this way it will look more pristine and uniform for a longer period of time. And I do recommend putting this in an actual wood shadow box that has glass, because it will help cut down on the temperature and humidity changes that can affect paper. I know that there's some paper sculptures. There's one paper sculpture that we released during fall of, I believe, last year, that was hanging up in my kitchen actually through Christmas, and it did very well because it was protected. All right, so now I'm pushing and it's not really giving as much, and that's just gonna, it means it's gonna, stay that way for a longer period of time. Now we also want to add some more in the center here, okay, just to distribute the load. It's almost like we're building a house here. And, I figure if you're gonna make someone a gift that is this beautiful, we may as well throw a couple extra foam pads on here and do it right. Okay, I think that's probably fine. I'm gonna throw one more here, and then what I want to do is I'm gonna grab, let me see, these foam squares. I don't know if these foam squares are the same height. They're actually almost the same height. I'm gonna throw one foam square right there. Okay, all right, so now that we've got that done, where did there it is. I'm just peel these off, okay? And then what we're gonna do is get this thing applied to the backing, the main color here, which is a nice little pink that we have here. And get that applied, and there we go. And then we can work on our flowers. And again, I may already have a video on applying vinyl. I don't know if I do. If I don't, I'll put one together. But we do include a caption for you that you can apply with your choice of vinyl to really pretty this thing up even more. Now this thing is that one's kind of lost its sticky for some reason, so I'm going to reapply that one. And before you know it, this is a quick little project, and again, this would be great for a wedding gift. You can put the bride and groom's name in vinyl. Okay, I think I got them all. All right, now these two little pieces here, what you do with those, and they're mostly just for alignment. So what you can do, let me get this centered here. There we go. Okay, well, I'll move it around if I have to. You put this in the corner here, like so, and then you can either eyeball it, or you can use a little pen or a pencil to draw a little mark don't know if I have a pencil handy here. I should, but I don't think I do. I'm gonna use a red pen. Yeah, that's probably not a good idea. Anyway, you can draw, here, I'm gonna show you on a different piece of paper so that I don't ruin this. If you want to do this, you can eyeball this if you want, but pretend that this white piece is this corner right here. You would put that up there, and then with a pen, either just do a dot, or with a pencil, I should say, either do a dot or draw, you know, a little registration mark, we'll call it, and that's going to help us align this piece. So you'll have one here and maybe one here at the bottom or on the opposite side to help you figure out where to put the corner so that this piece is nice and centered. I think because I do a lot of photography and I have a pretty good eye for centering things, that I'm going to omit that and just eyeball it. And I think I'm usually pretty good at getting it nice and centered. Okay, and you're probably going to see my head pop in here real quick. Yep, there's my head. And just make sure that you got it nice and centered. And what will actually help too is if you have one of these cutting boards, you can kind of use the grid as a little guide to help you with making sure that it's level as well. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to drop that right in the center. There we go. How did I do? I think I did all right. All right, just give it a nice light push in the areas where you have your little foam squares. Okay, and there we go. Let's say that, yeah, it's actually not very centered. I could have done better, and I probably should have used a little marker, and I recommend that you do. I think with these foam squares, if you peel them off quick enough, they won't fully grip. All right, so I get to try again, and this time I am going to use the little I'm going to use the little guides here, and you know what might be better than, instead of using a pen, I'm gonna just put a little notch in there with my X-Acto, and because I really don't really have a pencil handy, and as long as I just get somewhat of a visual on where that goes, it will help me with the alignment. Yeah, you can't see that, but I can. And that's kind of what I was hoping for, because I don't want that visible once we get this in place. I just want to have a visual to help me with the alignment, but I don't want anyone else to see that it's there. Okay, and I can see that. Nobody else is going to see it. And now this time, I'm going to get this thing beautifully centered because I use my little guides. Okay, so I got one there, and excuse my head. Probably gonna go to my B-roll. There we go, yep, and that worked out better because of my little guides, okay? So we've got that nice and centered. I'm gonna push down a little bit harder. Now don't push down too hard because you're gonna risk warping the paper unless you've got a ton of foam squares down. So I'm gonna put that off to the side for now while we put our little flowers together, but look how beautiful that is. And you see the kind of dimension that adding the little foam squares adds to this. You have a beautiful little drop shadow here, actually all the way around, and that just totally elevates this project, literally and visually. So let's put that off to the side and let's take a look at our flowers. Okay, so we have a total of 8 flowers. In my case, 5 of them are in one color, white. 3 of them are in a pink color, okay? Now, what we did to make this easier on you, and let's start with the pink ones, okay? We've got these guys here, and these guys here. So there, as far as the pink flowers go, in my case, one flower has round petals, and 2 of the flowers have these pointy little petals here. And what we did to help you identify which pieces go with which flower is we've put a little 1 or a 2 right in the center of the flower, so it's a lot easier for you to determine what goes with what. Okay, now for this round one here, we have a white round center. One of these pointy ones has this sort of stamen, and the other one has this kind of stamen. Okay, so let's take a look at the white flower here, the round white flower. And all I'm going to do, and you guys have seen me do this a dozen times already, is I'm going to take my dowel and I am simply going to wrap the petal around the dowel to make it kind of stand up and curled out. Okay, so we're going to do that to all 3 layers. And with this one, I'm kind of dragging the dowel across the paper and using my finger behind it. So I've got it kind of sandwiched between my finger and the dowel, and I'm just running the dowel along the paper while kind of bending it towards me a little bit to train it towards me. Okay, you can do it a couple times if you want. All right. So we'll just do that a few times. And then our little white piece in the center, that is going to be probably pretty difficult to train with a dowel. You may need something thinner. I have this little thing. I don't know what that is. Just a nice little stiff piece of very thin metal. And I'm just kind of curling that up. And then once I get them initially curled, I'll just take and just kind of pinch it all together with my fingers, like so. Okay, and we're going to get this all glued together to form our first flower here. Okay, so I forgot this little guy here, and I'm going to take my little metal thing here, I'm not even sure what this is from, and get those petals curled back. Okay, and because it's so small, just kind of using my fingers to bring it in even more. And at this point, we can begin assembling the flower. So I'll add a little bit of glue right to the center of this first largest petal. It's the largest one. And then take the second largest and glue it right in the center. Make sure that you offset the petals so that they're not on top of each other. You want to stagger them like so. And don't worry about it being overly flat right now. Once this is nice and dry, we can kind of finesse the petals even more. And I'm going to throw a little more glue here right in the center. Just a little dot does it. You don't need to overdo it on the glue. And again, we're going to offset the petals, get them nice and centered, and push down to help it kind of grip quicker. Another little dab of glue in the center, and get that next one in there. Don't forget to stagger the petals nicely. And then finally, our tiny little one, I'm going to put the glue on the back of this instead of on the flower because it's such a small piece. I don't want I don't want to get in the wrong spot and then regret it later. And I'm going to use my dowel to help me push that in place. Okay, so there's our first little flower. Not bad. And again, I'm going to push this down again. And then you can take your finger, whichever finger you want, your thumb, your pointer, your middle, whatever, your ring finger, and just kind of pull these petals up to give this a little bit more dimension. Okay. Now there's also another flower that goes together the same exact way in a different color, which is this one here. We're going to do this in white. Same process, largest to smallest. You know, get your petals nice and trained and curled like so, and that's pretty much it. Okay, and I'll show you where all of these go once we get them built. So this one's done. This one here that's round, it's going to go together the same exact way, except the size is just a little bit different. So I'm not going to show that on camera because that's redundant. And that looks pretty good to me. Okay, now let's take a look at these two sets of flowers here. Only difference with these flowers is the size, of course. This one's a little bit bigger, this one's a little bit smaller, and the stamen pieces, this one is more spiky or star-like, this one is more scalloped. And again, just make sure that you have the three that have the little one on them. And for this flower, just make sure that you have all three with the two little dashes in there indicating Roman numeral 2. Okay, so the process is going to be the same. And I'm going to start with my 1/4-inch dowel, and I'm just going to curl the petals to bring them to life. Okay, notice that I'm not doing any inking on this. I'm just kind of going with the raw colors. And the training itself is going to give the illusion in some places of an inking process. But again, it's not necessary, but it would be cool if you did decide to ink your flowers. But we are going to jazz these up with some nice pearls. Okay, so again, I'm just taking and training each of these little petals here. And I'm going to take the center one and actually curl it. Not just train it, but literally wrap it around the dowel to really make it pop. And maybe after I do so, it might kind of curl back a little bit because I'm getting the dowel in there to work on the next one. But when you do this sort of training technique, what you're doing is you're kind of creating a muscle memory in the paper fibers. So then we can take our fingers and push them back into that shape that we created or trained the paper fibers to kind of take on when we rolled it through the dowel. Okay, so I'm just gonna really accentuate the training on these a little bit because I know that over time they tend to kind of revert back to not their original position, but they do kind of go back a little bit. So anyway, all right, so we're going from largest to smallest, and I've got my largest piece here. I'm gonna throw a little dot of glue in the center, and I am officially dealing with my first clog of the day. Yeah, it's funny how the smallest piece of dried glue can cause a clog in a bottle like that. Okay, so starting with the largest piece, throwing a little bit of glue right in the center, grabbing the next largest piece and popping it right in the center, just making sure that I'm offsetting the petals and that I have them nice and centered. Give it a good squeeze in the center there and pop that down. And grab that next one. Okay. And just pop that right in the center, just like we did the first time. And we finish it off with, in this case, the little scalloped stamen, simple, tiny little dot of glue right in the center. And you know what I didn't do is I didn't train the little stamen piece here, or the center of the flower. So I'm going to do that real quick, hopefully before my glue dries. And then I'm just going to pinch that with my fingers. And we're going to jazz that up with a nice little pearl or rhinestone when we're done to really finish off that center. Use my dowel so that I don't accidentally push those little scallops down. Okay, and there's our next little flower. And again, you can finesse this however you want. I think the more random, the better. And our second flower here is done. This one's going to go together the same exact way, except that the stamen piece is this little star shape. And with the stamen piece, you can go ahead and just kind of curl those. And you know what? You probably don't even need to use a tool for that. You can probably just do it with your fingers. They're so small that I don't think you're really going to be even able to see a fold or a crease if you do this by hand. I'm just kind of just twirling it between my fingers to raise those little stamen pieces up like that. And that looks really nice. Okay, so that flower's done. And again, I'm just going to put that one together the same exact way. So I'm going to put that off to the side. And let's take a look at these guys here. Now I'm shifting over to the next color, which in this case, in our case, it's white. In your case, it may be something different, and it's up to you. So, you know, again, if you worked on the Alluring Florals, which was our previous release, you'll know that there were specific ways that we wanted, or we recommended, that the flowers be shaped and trained. In this case, I think for the most part, yeah, it's pretty safe to say that the shaping on all these is pretty much the same. We're training them up to elevate them a little bit and give them a little bit of dimension. And with this one here, if you want to get fancy, you can take and just kind of curl the corners or the tops of that just to kind of give it a very random kind of shape so that they're not all the same looking. And I wouldn't overdo it, but a little randomness here and there to kind of give them their own personality is recommended. I think it'll make it look that much more real and unique. Okay, and that's all you really want to do, but most importantly, you just want to make sure that you're training them up so it's not flat. You want it, you know, dimensional, so it's not just a flat flower, because that's not the look we're going for. We're trying to create a sculpture here and not a scrapbook page. So I'm just taking and kind of playing with the petals and curling them in various directions, and then ultimately at the end here, I'm going to take this and just kind of cup it and make it alive like so. So starting with the largest of the two pieces, just throw a little dot of glue right in the center, grab the next largest, or the piece that's just a little bit smaller, and get that nice and centered. Again, offsetting the petals so that they're not fighting each other too much. Okay, and give that a good squeeze, make sure it's nice and centered. And once that's fully dry, we can go in and kind of finesse these and pull them in even more to give them a little more dimension. And then we've got this spiral-shaped stamen piece, which I'm going to take and just kind of flick it to raise it up a little bit, and then you can go ahead and squeeze it to bring these little stamen pieces up. Okay, I don't think using a tool is really necessary in this case because they're so tiny. I don't think you're going to really notice the crease all that much. Okay, so there we go. And let's just throw a little bit of glue on the back of this. and pop that right in the center. And I'm going to use my dowel to kind of help me with the positioning. There we go. Okay, so that flower's done. And this guy here is the same exact flower, except with 3 petals instead of 2. Okay, so the process is going to be exactly the same. You're going to train the petals, okay, just like this. And you can give each little petal its own little personality by kind of folding it one way. Actually, you know, you can fold it backwards too. And just try to make it look unique. Okay. So again, just train all 3 of these. Do the same thing with the center, get that glued together. And that just leaves a couple more flowers here, which we'll go over right now. All right, so on to our next flower here. And again, the process for pretty much all these flowers is going to be identical, where we're just taking and training the petals out. And then with this one here, I don't think we're going to get too fancy with anything here. We're just going to train these out and get them glued together. And then I actually finished the other flowers off camera, the ones that were redundant, and finessed some of the other ones since they were dry. I'll kind of show you what I did here in a second once we get these last 2 assembled, and then we can finish off the project by just getting everything glued in place. Okay, so again, we're starting with the largest petal, and I'm just going to drop a little bit of glue right in the center. I might have gone a little overboard with that one, and place that one right in the center, offset, so that they're not fighting and competing for space. There we go. Just like that. Each little petal here, each layer wants to be seen, so we don't want to stagger them right on top of each other. We want to offset them and let them all shine. Okay. And next little drop of glue right in the center there. Offset the petal. And just press. Get that nice and glued. And the little stamen pieces here, I'm using a tool. You probably don't have to. We're just taking each of these little stamen pieces here, and I'm gonna just twirl this in between my fingers like this to pull them up like so. And just pop a little bit of glue right on the bottom of that. Get that nice and centered in our flower. And then once this is all together, I'm gonna, again, put some rhinestones in various places. So take a look at the final photo to get a feel for where I put those embellishments. Again, there's no rule saying that they have to go there, but if you want to kind of make it the way that we did, then by all means, take a look at the final photo and use that as a guide. All right, so on to our last flower here. Again, same process. You can totally fast forward this. I know that some of you actually watch the video in its entirety or kind of scrub through it to kind of get a feel for what the project entails, and you can pretty much put 2 and 2 together. You can see that all my little strokes here are pretty much identical, so you can go through the project, get all your flowers nice and trained and make them dimensional, get them all glued, and that's pretty much it. We'll be done before you know it here. So we'll start with our first flower here, our first petal, get the largest one, then the second largest, and pop that right in the center, offsetting the petals nicely and evenly. Okay, and our next dot of glue, and next in size, nice and centered, give it a good squeeze. Okay, next one, grab that, pop that right in there. And now this one has two little stamen pieces, and I'm gonna just take these and just kind of curl them with my fingers, and then just kind of twist it and spin it between my fingers here to bring that up. Grab the next one. One of them is going to have less of a bend. So that one's got more of a bend. This one's got a little bit less of a bend. The one with less of a bend, we're going to throw down first. Get that right in the center. I'm going to use my dowel so I don't push the little stamens down too much. Here we go. And finish that off with the next piece. Try to offset that as well so that we get more coverage like that. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to put that off to the side with this other one and let those dry. And let's just take a look at these real quick. What I did was, after everything was nice and dry, I'll start with these specifically. I took the inside and peeled them in, or pulled them in, I should say, a little bit more. And then the inner layer of petals, I kind of squeeze those in so that they're more towards the center. And then I actually took the outer layer, the last, the backmost layer, and pulled them back a little bit, okay? And that kind of spaced everything out more evenly, made it look more full. That's just personal preference. I think that's gonna kind of help, again, make it more full. Did the same with that. I took the outer petals and pulled them back just ever so slightly, took the center ones and pulled them in, the next layer in just a tad, and then the last layer in just a little bit, just to kind of give it a natural flow and make it look more full. Okay, so there's all our flowers. This one here, this is actually a good one to do this and show you here. So I'm going to take these inner petals and I'm going to fold them in a little bit more. Okay, like that. And actually I'm going to take these stamen in here too and pull those in like that. And then the second layer, I'm going to pull that in a little bit. Okay, like that. And then this back layer, I'm going to just push that out a little bit, create a little bit of separation. And I accidentally flatten this out while doing that. So maybe do the little stamen part last. Okay, and there you go. So that just totally made the flower more dimensional, a little more full looking as well. Okay, so let's take a look at this one here. The stamen on this, I want to lift these up a little bit more and bring them to life a little bit more. The inner petals, I'm going to bring those in a little more. Outer ones, I'm going to fold them out just a tad, just to make it look a little more full, and that looks good. Okay, so our flowers are all done, and we can grab our frame here, and we can begin just gluing our flowers down. So what you want to do is grab the largest flower that we have here with these round little stamens, okay, and that's going to get glued right there. Okay, so let's just grab, well, let me get this in frame so you can actually see it. Okay, so it's now time to put our flowers down, and we're going to begin with a white flower, in my case white, and it's going to be the larger of the two flowers that look like this. with the little spirally looking center. Okay, so I'm just going to throw a little bit of glue right on the back here. And I'm actually standing up so that I can get a better visual on what I'm doing. And we're going to pop that right in there. Okay, right in the center of that little circle area that we had. Okay, so that goes there. And then just above that here, in this area here, we're going to do another white flower in my case. And it's going to be a round white flower. And it's going to be the... it's going to be this guy here. Okay. And let me dab that a little bit. All right, so let's get that in position. I'm going to use my dowel to push that down. And just be gentle with it. Give it ample time to dry. All right, upper left corner here, we're going to do in my case, pink flower. And it's going to be this one here that's pointy, but it has the round scalloped center. Okay, so you can put a dot of glue here if you want, or on the back of the flower. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's get that right in place. Let's scoot this down a little bit. There we go. Give that a little push. Okay. And we're going to kind of work our way around clockwise. Up here, we're going to do, in my case, a white flower. And it's going to be the second largest one with the 2 stamen centers. Oops. Okay, let's throw a little dot of glue there. And get that positioned nicely. Okay, that should hold nicely. All right, and now up here, we're going to do this one here. Okay, it's in my case white. So let's throw a little dot of glue there. Let me get this centered for you. And get that right in place. Give that just a tiny little push. Don't need to overdo it. Okay. And now here, in this section here, I'm going with a pink flower, and it's going to be this one here, the pointy one. Okay, so go ahead and drop some glue right in that spot. And get that right there. And then we've got our largest flower. In my case, it's white. And that is going to go right here. Okay, like so. And you want to kind of line up the petals like so. There's almost like a little silhouette there to show you where that goes. Okay, so let's do that like that. And last but not least, we have a pink flower here. I'm going to throw that right there, and it's the last flower. And I'm just going to center that nicely. And there we go. Okay, so all of our flowers are in place. Look how beautiful that is. It's really pretty. Okay. Okay, so our sculpture is now complete. And again, it's ready to go inside. And I'm not going to do this right now, but just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like, nice and framed up. That is beautiful. I don't have the glass in here yet. And again, you throw your little caption on there, and it's going to make a beautiful gift. Could be a housewarming present, a gift for mom, a wedding. But we intended this for a Mother's Day gift, but of course it can take on so many different possibilities. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Hope you enjoyed the process. If you did, please take a moment to Subscribe to us on YouTube, and as always, I look forward to crafting with you again.
Stay on top of all things Dreaming Tree and engage with us today. Get the latest news and enter in our giveaways on Facebook. Get inspired by following us on Pinterest. Be the first to see our new product launches on Instagram. Do you prefer Twitter? Yep, we're there too. Watch our beautiful product trailers and assembly tutorials on YouTube. For more information, visit www.3dsvg.com. Live, craft, love, and dream.